everyone, it's Jill Foster here for Penny Black, and this video is a little bit different than my typical videos. I'm going to be sharing several videos where I do some no-line watercolor looks, and in this video I just wanted to give you a look at what I do when I'm planning to make cards like this, how I get ready to do my painting, and the colors and materials that are in my palette. So to begin with, I like to use a variety of different paints when I am painting. These are my current favorites. And the first is the Arteza Gouache paints. Now, I just bought some super cheap palettes at, I think it was Target, but you can find these at all different places. And I fill my palettes with some of my favorite colors. So one tip I would have is if you've gotten a new set of paints or new colors or even markers, just pick out like your most favorite colors. I had like a scratch paper and tested those and found my colors I know I reach for often, and those are the only ones I'm putting in my palette. Now in the future, I may start adding in one or two new colors to my palette, but this lets me know that what I have in my palette are just the colors I know I'm really going to love. I did sort of a greens and blues and neutrals here on this palette, and then I will add in some warmer red tones on the next palette, so I will have two going. Now, one thing I really like about gouache paint is one, when you put it in the palette, it will harden in the palette, and you can just keep using these from the palette just by re-wetting them with water. Now, gouache paint to me is sort of like a mixture between watercolor paint and acrylic paint. So if you use it right out of the tube and it's still like juicy like this, it really feels like the word has skipped my mind. Acrylic, thank you. There it is, acrylic paint. So right out of the tube like this, for me it feels a lot like acrylic paint. Once it hardens, or if I mix it with a lot of water and water it down, then it is more like just a regular watercolor. And with this paint, I find there's this wonderful in between where there's not too much water and it's not too thick, where it goes on like a watercolor, but it is going to have more of the opacity. It's going to be more opaque than a typical watercolor, which I find is really useful and is great for mixing and matching with my watercolors. So I rarely will paint an entire image with just gouache paint, but I love to add it in certain places where I want more opacity or I want the color to be really rich and really strong and bold. Now, by no means, if you're going to stamp and make cards, do you need all of these different types of watercolors, all of these different types of paints. But I just wanted to share with you what I like to do. I make a lot of cards, and sometimes people ask me, how do you get all these cards made? And I do a lot of things in sort of an assembly line fashion. So I get all of my palettes ready to go, and they're all set out, and I can come to them at any time and they're ready to go. There's no getting them out, putting them away, getting them out and putting them away. So this is kind of the first step in my personal process. Everyone has different ways they like to do things, but this is how I like to do it. Now, my other favorite go-to painting medium is actually Distress Ink Reinkers. So this is the reinker that you'd normally put on your ink pad, but I love to use it to paint with. The color is really vibrant, really bold. They're the distress colors that I'm very familiar with from inking and ink blending and stamping, but they're just really fun to paint with. They go on a little bit different than watercolors. I feel like there's a little bit more, they're more forgiving, and they also work really well for the no-line watercolor look. So I am just getting a palette ready with these. This is the same thing. If you put this palette, like I usually put mine up at the top shelf so I don't like stick my hand in it or spill it. But you can leave this for days, weeks at a time and pull it out, and the inks are just still ready to go. They don't dry out, they don't even get hard in the palette. So you might even want to look for a palette that has a lid. That might be something if you're going to be doing this with the Distress Inks Reinkers. Now here are some other options, and I do reach for these. You can see this is a well-loved ink set of inks. This is a Securakoi Field Sketch Box. If you're just getting started, you can do all the watercoloring you need with just that one field sketch box. These are my favorite brushes. These are the silver black velvet round brushes. And then if I'm going to be doing any really small detail work, then I also like to use the Arteza detail brush set. So here's the silver black velvet brushes. And then I'll grab here, this is just a set of brushes. These are very affordable from Arteza, and I like them just for very tiny, tiny details. I also often use a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen in black. This is waterproof, so I can add this color right on. I use it in black often, and then in the green. This is a small tip, so it's very fine, like journaling tip. It's great for like tracing over a stem. I'm usually steadier with my hand with a pen than I am with a paintbrush. Now I also like to use some twine markers, and they have this really fine tip. I think you can kind of see it there on my camera go into focus for you. And that's also great for tracing over stems or small details that you might not want to paint. So just a few colors of those. Now those are not waterproof, so if you're using those, I typically try to make sure I do that at the very end. I have my wonderful Wonder Woman cup handy, and also napkins or paper towel to sort of blot off my brush as I'm painting. Now here is a look at the papers that I typically reach for when I'm going to do my no-line watercoloring. The first here is Canson watercolor paper, 140-pound cold press. I usually buy it in the pads like this. It's very affordable. Now this is not one I use a lot, but this is the Arches Rough watercolor paper, and it has a really gorgeous texture. So I like to use that with very simple cards because the texture adds to that. Now to stamp the images, I use Memento Desert Sand, archival ink in Acorn. That's just a mini ink pad. And then I also, yep, there's the desert sand again. That's really great for the no-line watercoloring look, and it works really well with the Distress Ink Reinkers used as watercolors. Sometimes I will use the cobalt blue or the shadow gray. And what I do, I use a Misty stamp positioning tool. Again, you can see all of my supplies are very, very well loved, and I like to spend my time coloring and not cleaning. Obviously, you can see my Misty there is got some over stamping that is in permanent ink, and it's just fine. It's not going to rub off on my projects, and I can use it there. So this is one of the new Penny Black cling stamps, and I will have a full video showing me paint this in, but I just wanted to show you here. I will stamp this in my Misty. The Misty is really nice when I'm stamping onto watercolor paper because I can stamp it multiple times in order to get good coverage. So I just put in my paper and then stamp that down. And if I want the no line look, then I use that Desert Sand Memento ink to do the stamping. So if I'm going to stamp and do my card sort of assembly line style, I will sit and stamp everything, all the cards I want to do all at once. You can see I've stamped my images, and then I've stamped my sentiments with that Acorn archival ink is what's on the sentiments, and sort of planned out the design. I also like to do it this way. That way, if I goof up stamping the sentiment, I haven't already spent all the time coloring it. So I could just restart and restamp things. So I'm giving you a look at here at some of the cards that I've stamped, and I will have videos for showing how I do that. Some of these, I won't have videos like these. I won't have a video for each of these cards, but I'm just showing you how I have everything stamped and ready to go. And then I can sit down and color and just really enjoy or paint the process. And I find I get a lot of cards made this way because it's sort of like creating my own little coloring book, and I can just sit down and enjoy the painting. And I might only be able to sit down for a few minutes and paint for just a few minutes, but that's more than if I had to get out the paints, stamp the image, design the card, figure out where to put the sentiment. That would take up the whole time, but if it's already ready to go, I can take that 5-10 minutes to just paint a part of the image. So all of those were on the Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. And then for some, I like to do on the rough paper, especially these fashion girl images. And those I like to stamp with the archival shadow gray ink to almost give it the look like it was sketched out with a pencil. And then I go in with that black Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen to just darken up some details, usually just their eyes. I'll color in with the black. But you can see I've done a set of these just ready now for paint, and then they can be added to a card base and they will be done. There you can see I added a sentiment with a cobalt blue archival ink. So now here's a look at some of the finished cards, just a little peek. Like I said, this video is just kind of talking you through my process and what supplies I like to do for the painting. And in other videos, so if you check our Penny Black Ink YouTube channel, you will find videos for these cards showing the actual painting process. So never fear, I will be sharing that with you. Just be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss those once I release those for you, make those public so that you can watch them. I thank you so much for watching. I hope seeing this process inspires you to maybe try doing an assembly line style to create lots of fun and unique Christmas cards and enjoy the painting process. Be sure to subscribe, and you can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website and blog, and links to all of those are down in our YouTube or down in the YouTube description box. See you soon with more painting.